Welcome everybody. This is RebelEars.com with my good partner YL.
How's everybody doing? Rebel Ears YL here, and you're tuned in to the Rebel Ears podcast.
So today we're going to be talking about our pass at SAE using the famous SSL 4000G Plus. We're going to be talking a little about our vocal chains that we learned at Castle Hill and other studios, and then also different mics we've been using back and forth. We're going to be talking about our last session that YL and I had separately, and then we also going to be talking about some 500 series. So starting off, let's go ahead and talk about the SSL board.
SSL 4000G Plus. We learned that board at SAE. That was probably the premier board at SAE outside of the control surface, the decontrol icon board. But as far as consoles, SSL was the most legendary thing I've ever been a part of. I think anybody who went to SAE, that was probably like the highlight of their school career, I would say, being in front of this legendary console that has been legendary for the last 30, 40 years, I think is, I don't know, as far as the way I looked at it, I just felt like I was being a part of history, just being able to work on it. I would say that anybody else would feel like that, definitely.
Oh, yeah. There's only a few SSL boards in Georgia, actually, at the top studios. I know Tree Sound Studios have it. SAE, Doppler used to have it when Doppler was open. But, yeah, Patchworks, it's a very, very unique sounding board because a lot of people literally pay to work on the board just to get the warmth of the actual sound of the console itself. Some people have their vocal chain and they'll just record straight through the SSL board, definitely. And then they'll take that recording straight home because they just want to get the pristine,
that raw, warm, analog sound. And that's probably, anybody would probably tell you that, anybody who's crazy about the SSL, that's probably the best feature about the SSL is that warm, analog, pristine, just kind of classical sound.
Yeah.
Even dealing with your EQs and the compressors and your gates and your different dynamics and things like that, that's actually built in on the channels itself.
Yeah, and then the more you record yourself, the more you use different gears, the more you hear different sounds. Like with me, I know when I use the Manley Varimu for my Submaster, anytime I'm working on a mix, I can hear how it glues the instruments with the drums and the vocals. The more you use it, the more you can understand. Sometimes with a compressor, you gotta play around with the attack, release, the ratio, threshold. The more you use it, the more you can understand, like, okay, if I turn up the attack, the start of the vocal is going to be very tight. If I release, like have a lot of release at the end, the tail of the vocals will, it'll just end slightly instead of just like an instant. Like a quick release you would use on someone who's probably rapping real fast.
Right. I would say another key thing on the SSL 4000G Plus, there's a few different kinds of SSL, guys. We're speaking on the one that we've had our most experience on. I've seen maybe two other kinds, but I can't even remember the models. But I do remember the 4000G Plus, and it has it has a wonderful compression on it. It has a nice bus compression on it that you can apply to the end of your mixes. One of the most memorable things about the SSL 4000G that I remember was when we had to mix. Remember, we had that assignment. We had to record. We had to record a band. We had to record, like, I think 5 different types of
instruments. Yeah,
we had, so it'd be instruments, vocals,
drums, guitars. It was a few other instruments too. I remember that one.
Yep. And mixing on the SSL was, I felt more close to being a part of history and just understanding the work that it took back in the day when you talking about mixing the Beatles and Michael Jackson and different people like this, Whitney Houston, and different, the hugest artists in the world ever have been on the SSL, the hugest engineers ever have worked on the SSL board. And, just trying to mix the drum bus and trying to mix all of these different tracks. And, you might have 40 tracks across the SSL, and having to take those log sheets and having to kind of do my recall sheets at the end of the day. It kind of just made me fall in love with the history of audio, and I think that's my biggest thing about the SSL 4000. Man, it's legendary, and I mean, it makes you feel a part of history when you really know it and when you really get it. You know.
Yeah, and I remember we had a project with the SSL board. It was, 32, 40, 50 different tracks we had to mix all together?
We had to mix, what was that song?
I forgot the song, but
lay down. How does it go? It was like a country pop song, man.
Yeah,
and,
but it was just so many vocals, instruments, drums, and then the thing we had to do it all hands-on. So we had to use the compressor knobs, the EQ knobs, the faders. We had to use, the solo, mute. We had to use all the buttons and mix this full project and make it sound pleasing to the ears, because, when you hear something that pleasing to the ears, you automatically go straight to what you hear, like, oh, the vocal's too high. But if it's a good song, they'll be like, oh, it's dope. Automatically, that's the reaction you get when it's a good mix.
Definitely. I think the best thing about mixing on the SSL was the fact that you had to be so hands-on. When we were dealing with the SSL at SAE, we had a patch bay. We had plenty of outboard gear.
Much routing. That was crazy.
So that was more of, okay, I feel like I'm an engineer. Like, I go into different studios now and I can see their patch bays, and I've never been in this studio before, but I can read. And I know the different outboard gear. When I see API and I see different things on the patch bay that's labeled, I can say, okay, that's this piece of gear, the tube tech. Okay, that's this piece of gear. And I know I'm able to patch my own vocal chains when I record and I go in the studios. I can change around their patch bay. And that really came from us working with the SSL. Like, that's when we really, really got into learning how to patch and learning how to use outboard gear to mix. It's one thing to use outboard gear to record, but using it to mix,
you get
and then having to print it down and, so I don't know, man. I think the SSL, working on the SSL and everything around working on that analog board, that legendary analog board, I think that kind of geared us up into being who we are today and being comfortable with being in these different studios.
I don't think I did actually that good when it come to routing. Good example. You remember Castle Hill Studio? You was in the B room, I was in the A room, and I called you in the A room when Jay Farrell was there. So, of course, Jay Farrell from Saturday Night Live, he was doing something with Music Soul Child and Bone Crusher. They had a session there. Dan asked me if I wanted to. I was interning at the time. He asked me if I wanted to just, record for a few hours. I told him, yeah, okay. So he left. I was with Jay Farrell in the A room. You was in the B room with the artist. I remember there was something was wrong with the patch bay. I didn't figure it out because I was just automatically making the assumption it was inside Pro Tools. I'm not even figuring out that. I think for the session they was using a different preamp. And I didn't patch it to the Neve 1073 because basically with the A room you have your C800 microphone and it's going straight to the Neve 1073 straight into the TubeTech CL1B. And that's how it was normally routed when it came to the vocal chain. But they was using some other preamp that wasn't chained into the session that I opened up. So
it could have been the Avalon. I know they've added so much gear in the A room. I remember that night though.
You couldn't even help me. Well, you tried to help me. I had to call Dan. Yeah.
And then we was trying to because what we thought it was, and I mean, granted, remember we always talk about experiences is the best teacher, guys.
That's true. Yeah.
The thing that was important about this was a problem that we never came upon.
Yeah.
Usually when you go in the studio, vocal chains are already patched in. And I think what happened was we just didn't pay attention to the actual patching. I think we were looking more internal routing inside of Pro Tools and dealing with the word clock and dealing with the I/O and different things like that inside of Pro Tools to where, and actually let me say this too. Most of the problems that you have in audio, in the studio, live sound, is usually right in front of your face. It's usually just a button or some type of setting. It's usually the smallest thing that you have to fix. And I mean, going through that issue, and even though I really wasn't able to figure it out, and I was in a whole nother session with an artist, that kind of put us both into a situation to where we had to learn from experience. So when Ray was able to figure it out, he was able to call me in the other room and was like, hey, this is what it was. I'm like, okay, bet. Now I know if I ever have that problem or if he ever has that problem again.
We know how to troubleshoot it.
We know how to troubleshoot it and get the session going.
Yeah, it's basically signal flow. You understand signal flow, you understand exactly, okay, I'm not getting no signal into the mic, so something is not connected or something is off. So when you understand more about signal flow, it makes the session a whole lot easier. When it comes to tracking, tracking is basically, while you're working on recording, you mix it while recording in a way.
Right.
From signal flow, it really helped me a lot from that incident at Castle Hill Studios and even Tree Sound Studios, because the interns there, they had to know the board itself. So if there's any problem and the owners or the studio manager is not there, the intern should be, the next person to be able to fix any issue from the board, because, the audio engineer, the engineer who booked the room is, they basically there to record the artist, and that's it. When it comes to internal, some engineers know what to do, but those who are just starting off and not experienced using other people's gear, of course, you call the intern there, and they should have some knowledge on what's the issue, like we had when we was, intern at SAE. No, Castle Hill Studios.
Castle Hill,
yeah.
Right. To speak on that too, man, I'm gonna tell you, when I first started recording, every problem that would come up, I would go and get the intern, even if I knew how to fix it. Right. So I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna tell you guys. Like I said, experience is the best teacher, man.
Yeah.
Experience is the best teacher. So I was at the studio and I was having issues, and I kind of knew what the problem was, but I'm like, for insurance purposes, I'm not gonna cut anything off, because when I walk in the studio, a guest studio or any studio, if you have your own studio and you are renting it out to different engineers, producers, artists, whoever you rent it out to, you should already pretty much have it hardwired up. The engineer, producer, nobody should have to come in and turn this on and plug this in and do different things like that. It should already be hardwired.
Yeah.
So for insurance purposes, I used to always go and get the intern. Hey, man, Pro Tools tripping on me. Woo, 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 woo. I already restarted the computer. Woo, 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 woo. Well, did you restart the interface? I knew to restart the interface, but I wasn't going to do it. I'm going to let you touch the interface.
Because if anything happened, that's not on me.
But guess what I learned from that, right?
What?
So Dan called me. Rest in peace, Dan, man.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Dan called me, and one day I had talked to the intern like, hey, and the intern couldn't figure it out. And this is when I started to really learn. This is probably a few years ago. And this is when I really started to learn the type of recording engineer and the type of engineer I wanted to be when I'm bringing artists to different studios.
Yeah.
He called me and he said, hey, my intern said that you're having trouble in the B room, woo. And I'm like, yeah, I forgot what was wrong, but it was something, it really wasn't nothing major. But as I'm sitting there watching the intern, I'm like, okay, this intern really doesn't know a lot. Right? So I had a real conversation with one of the owners of the studio at the time. And he told me, he said, look, you're the engineer. You charge all of this money because you're an engineer. You know this gear.
Yeah.
My interns, they're not even getting paid. So they don't really know a lot. You are the engineer. You are the professional. So not to say that you're wrong for going to get the intern when it's an issue, because if it's an issue with the system, then my client is waiting and time is money. So if it takes 20 minutes to get your studio working, and this is why I say if you own a studio, make sure it's already hardwired together.
Yeah.
Because the person who booked that studio room, if it's not my fault that your gear is not working or not plugged up right or not routed right, that's going to throw me off, because maybe I've never been here before. I don't know how your studio is routed. I don't feel comfortable with touching your gear. You got so many different things plugged up together. And he really just told me, like, look, man, I don't mind, when they call me, I let them know what's going on. But at the end of the day, he's like, bro, you are the trusted professional. If you know what's wrong with it, just fix it.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, nah, you ain't gonna get me like that.
Because as soon as something happens, automatically I'm gonna get blamed.
It's my
for
fault,
it. Yeah.
because I'm a contractor. I'm freelancing out of this room. I don't work for the studio. But then I started to think, like, how much time would I save? How much more would that make me look good in front of my client when I figure out these issues?
Yeah.
So over the last few years, when I have trouble at different studios, like very rarely do I have to go get someone who works there, unless it's like a outer routing issue, a hardwiring issue with outboard gear, different things like that. Because you can't really tell what's patched to what and what's hooked up to what hardwire wise as far as outboard, because you can't get behind the gear.
Yeah.
Now, any problems with Pro Tools, any problems with computer, different things like that, I'm not going to get anybody about. But it kind of taught me to just have confidence in who you are, like experience. Like, you've been through so many different experiences to where you've learned, and so have I. Like, why would we not use it? That's what it kind of put me in the space of, like, a lot of the problems that I'm going to get interns for, I know the solution, and I'm telling the intern what to do, or I'm sitting back letting the intern do what they do because they supposed to be trained to this gear. And if I would have just did it myself, it would have sped my session up.
Yeah, it would have been a whole lot different.
That's something I learned early, bro. And shout out to Dan, because it wasn't like a disrespectful type of thing. It was just like, hey, man, like,
if you know what to do,
you have to be who you say you are. Are you an audio professional? Do you know this outboard gear? Do you know Pro Tools? Then fix it. We trust you to fix it because you know more than our interns. We know you are an engineer. We know you are a professional. That's why we allow you to come into the studio. We expect you to fix it before them because they might not know that much.
Yeah, that is true.
And I was like, I got you. And from then on, bro, I've been troubleshooting myself for real.
Yeah, that's one thing I do love. Like, when you figure out the issue and you can just go on to the session runs smoothly. There was a session when I was interning at Castle Hill Studios. The engineer didn't know what was going on. He spent the whole time trying to see why he wasn't getting no signal into the mic.
Right.
All he had to do was get me, because at the time I was the intern there. It was a late night session. And, of course, the engineer just wasting time and money. Didn't even think of getting me because I guess he didn't think I knew the room or whatnot. When the session ended, I asked him, how was the session? Man, it was good, but I spent the whole hour, not recording. So I asked him, I asked him, so what happened the first hour? He was like, I was just trying to get the signal into Pro Tools, trying to see why it wasn't going through the mic and whatnot. So when I went into the room, it was as simple as his input on Pro Tools. Because he was trying to record on another track that didn't have no input for it. So he didn't even think of it as, okay, so I just need to go ahead and put the input of this for the mic that I'm using.
Right, which means he probably was using a template that he built for another room, which is why it's important to build templates for certain rooms.
For certain artists too.
And even for certain interfaces, because your inputs and outputs will be internally routed differently. And if you pull up your template that you made for your home studio and you bring it into Patchwork, their inputs might be totally different.
Yeah.
But and to piggyback off of what Ray was just speaking on about that particular guy, do not be afraid to ask for help. If you don't know, you don't know. Like, you are there to please the artist. Nothing is pleasing them to the artist less than not having enough time when they pay for it.
Yeah, of course. I
do not drag your sessions out because you don't know. If you got the owner's number, if you got to YouTube it, just let them know, like, hey, we got to figure this out. We got to go ask so-and-so. Don't be ashamed to do that because this is not your studio. So it's understandable that you might not know everything about it. Trying to figure it out yourself and you really don't know what you're doing, now you're wasting time and money, and that artist is not coming back.
Yeah, it'll be better just wasting 30 minutes getting the answer from the owner and they help you fix it than spending a whole hour trying to fix it yourself.
Yeah, because if you spend an hour trying to fix it, it makes it look like you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not really know sometimes, but think about how much time you would have saved just by, hey, hold on, bro. These folk, they computer tripping and they Pro Tools, whatever tripping. Let me go get this staff. The staff comes in, they can fix it in 15 minutes, cool. If they can't fix it, well, now it takes because what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure you keep your clients coming back. Yeah. So you don't want to spend an hour trying to fix something that really could have took 15, 20 minutes, they're not coming back to you because they're going to feel like you're an amateur.
Yeah. And then, like, with me, educate yourself on something. Of course, you don't know. I said it so many times in the podcast because it's true. If there's something you don't know and that time comes around and it happens again, you look like the fool. Because the first time, good example, when it came to the A room, after that session with Jay Farrell, I knew exactly how to fix the patch bays on when it came to the signal flow from the mic to the Neve 1073, because I do believe it was the Avalon around that time.
Right.
Yeah. They still got a lot of gear. They bought some new setup gear.
All the time.
Yeah. So that gives you time to realize, okay, they got all this gear. I got to learn all this gear. I got to learn the API. I got to learn the Avalon. I got to learn the Neve 1073. What kind of mics they're using. Oh, they're using Neumann's. Oh, they're using Sony C800, Manley reference cardioid mic. Oh, you go to another studio. Oh, they're using the Neumann U87, U47. Oh, this mic is Audio Technica. You know, all these mics you got to learn, all these different vocal chains, all these outboard gear plugins, you got to learn if you're going to be a good engineer. If you want to be a successful engineer, you got to learn all of this. It takes time. Like, if it's something you're passionate about, it's going to be a whole lot easier for you. With me, I was learning about this new plugin by Waves. I forgot the name of it. It just came out recently. I think it's kind of new reverb. I think it was emulating the Abbey Road, but they did that so many times. Yeah.
Right.
Do you know what I'm talking about? They be sending me emails.
It's a brand new Waves.
Yeah.
Nah, I probably skipped over that email. I get them, but y'all know how emails are. Sometimes you read them, sometimes you don't. Waves just got a nice little chunk of change for me a couple weeks ago, so I haven't been even focusing on them anymore lately.
Yeah, Waves. Oh, yeah, I spent a lot of money on plugins. I think more Universal Audios than Waves then. So Waves, me, Universal Audio?
Yeah, well, UA is way better than this is my opinion. So, nobody is paying for any kind of promotion or anything like that, but just on experience and just speaking with other industry professionals, most of us prefer UAD plugins.
Yeah,
but they are way more expensive.
Yes, they are.
Way more. I'm talking about 3-4 times as much as a Wave plugin, but they are better plugins, and they make better emulations of those outboard gear that you will see in these huge, large studios. So definitely, I really feel like at the end of the day, UA is better, but you're going to need a way larger budget to be able to deal with UA.
Yeah. UA, I'm trying to think, what's a plugin on Universal Audio that I would compare to Waves? Because with me, when it comes to the de-esser, I use this on a lot of my vocals. I love the Waves de-esser. I'm trying to think if Universal Audio has, like, of course they got compressors, they got gates. An actual de-esser, I don't think Universal Audio have like a plugin that's mainly for that, but you can emulate it through a plugin in there. Right. But just straight to the point, the Waves de-esser is one of my favorite. I learned from Steve though, doing manual de-essing is better because you don't take the.
Where you actually go into the waveform in DS.
Yeah, manual de-essing. So basically highlight the waveform. But what I would do, I would change it into volume. So what you would do. Let's say you say something with an S. So, sorry. The S in sorry, the sibilance, you just got to cut in. So, what you would do, you would go into Pro Tools, you would go to the track itself, change the waveform into volume. And with the volume, when the S starts, you would basically, I think, you would hold Option and click on the actual unity, which is 0 on the volume. Yeah, you would click it, and then where the S ends, because the S you're gonna see it's like when you start looking at waveform more as an engineer, you can automatically know, okay, this part is an S, and when you get to that S, okay, from the beginning of it and then the end of it, you would click Option, and you would click on both of those, and after you click on it, you would click 2 more in the middle, because what you're doing, you curve in that range of the sibilance. So that S, you try to curve it out. So when it comes in, that S, like, sorry, and it'll just be balanced out. It won't be irritating to the ears when you hear something like so much. It's kind of a ringing sensation to the ears. That's what engineers are focused on. They trying to make sure it's pleasing to the ears. So something as little as de-essing can help the song sound pleasant to the ears. And, that's my little spill on, a Waves plugin that I like. That Universal Audio, I don't believe they have a specific plugin for de-essing.
Right. Now, one thing about Waves has a whole lot more plugins.
So many.
Than UAD. UAD is probably triple, quadruple the price of Waves, but Waves probably has quadruple the amount of plugins also.
Yeah, like good example, the Sheps 73 that emulates the Need 1073 that Andrew Sheps used.
The Sheps, I love that plugin. It's a dynamic plugin.
Yep.
And it's kind of like...
It's emulating the Need 1073, but that's his own version for Waves. Yeah.
Right. It reminds me of the Manny Marroquin vocal shaper, because it's like an EQing type of plugin. Like, you turn your air up, you can turn your bass up, you turn up different
frequency ranges
of the vocals, but at the same time, it's a dynamic plugin because it's compressing what you're turning up automatically. It's like an automated type of thing. I love the Manny Marroquin vocal. You
had it. You got it.
The Manny Marroquin vocal shaper.
Wait, it was vocal tuner?
Yeah. Where you can turn up your lows, your low mids,
with some faders, right?
Yeah. But it's a dynamic plugin, but you're turning up, or you're enhancing certain frequencies in that plugin. I love the Sheps though.
Yeah.
I use that probably on every mix.
Oh, okay. That's something I just learned today.
Every mix. I like using it on my subs, on my auxes.
Yeah. So dynamic, that's something you want to research on. That deal with compression. Anytime you hear someone saying, can you change the dynamic of it? That can probably mean like, okay, it's probably too compressed. It's probably too tight. It's probably too loose. How's the attack? Is the artist coming in too quick or not quick enough? Is the release of it, is it too long, or is it like tight, straight to the point? Things like that you got to understand, like attenuate.
Right. If you click on...
What's attenuate?
Attenuate to turn down.
Okay. I just gotta make sure you was on point.
Oh,
man.
Come on, man. But if you click on any plugin and you kind of see threshold, attack, release, that's pretty much a dynamic plugin.
Ratio, clip gain. No, it's not clip gain. It's a makeup gain.
Yeah, it'll be makeup gain. But some plugins you don't have anything but gain reduction. But some plugins you'll just have like an input output. It
has gain reduction and
the 3A or the 76.
Threshold gain reduction. Those are the two knobs, right?
No, it's input, output, and ratio, or something like that.
On the LA2A, it's two knobs.
No. It's gain and
gain reduction and
peak. And peak.
Yeah,
because they have the in the vocal chain in the Castle Hill B room, they have a similar compressor type preamp.
I know what you're talking about. I remember.
It's peak reduction and gain. That's what it is.
Oh, peak reduction and gain. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the plugins will only have those two knobs. But once you understand, and then some plugins only have like input, output. That will actually affect your release, your threshold. You might not see thresholds a lot.
Yeah.
Once you understand what compression and what dynamics, not even just compression, but what dynamics are used for, you understand the threshold of a gate, the hold, the attack, the release, different parameters of a gate, of a de-esser, of a expander, compressor, limiter, all of these are dynamic plugins. Once you understand what they do and why they do what they do and why to use them, then you can kind of start buying these other plugins that's not so self-explanatory when you look at it, but you know what you're looking for. And more importantly, you know what you're listening for. Yeah. That's the most important part. Turn the knob till you hear something you like. Yeah. If all else fails, turn the knob till you hear something that you like.
Yeah, so going with that, hearing, you got to practice, ear EQ, basically testing frequency ranges. You got to test your ears out. So sometimes you got to understand if I'm in the range of 100, 300, that's in the low frequency range. 3 to 500, that's like still low range. That's like muddy in an aspect. 500 to 1,000, that's mid range. 1,000 to 10,000, that's high. Well, mid high, yeah. And when you understand, okay, if I put in 5K, will shine to the vocals. If I take away from 1,000, that could take some of the energy. And, little terms like that, you understand how to make this track sounds warm, how to make the track sound with more clarity, how you can make the track sound muddy, gritty, raw. There's so many different terms to use when it comes to the frequency range from 20 to 20,000 hertz.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, to be honest, when you're dealing with vocals, it changes per instrument.
Yeah.
Vocals are considered as an instrument for those who don't know.
Sometimes you gotta change the mic too.
And that's actually what I wanted to talk back on, because I know at one point we were discussing
vocal chain.
Right. The thing about microphones, and this is what I want to say to kind of just jump back, but also kind of like move forward in the conversation.
Yeah.
If you have your own studio, I've given a lot of advice to a lot of artists that buy their own studio gear. And, when you're buying mic, and I tell everybody, when you're buying a mic, don't just go out there and get a Neumann because you see that Guitar Center. And, you see it online and it has 5,000 good reviews. The thing about microphones that you have to understand is a microphone picks up what you give it.
Yep.
And a lot of microphones, they project lower tones. If you have a very, very, very deep voice, you need to be doing research on the microphone, preferably with a larger diaphragm so it can pick up the full range of your voice. I have a deep voice. I record a lot of artists that have deep voices. And the thing about these different mics are, you have to find these different mics that have these roll-offs, these 20 hertz, 60 hertz, 80 hertz, 75 hertz, whatever, that high pass filter on it, or that,
yep.
or so if you have a deep voice, you need to be looking for a microphone that's going to be able to project every tone, because you need to bring out some of those highs in that deep voice. But not only that, you need to be making sure, because certain microphones project better in different frequencies, in different frequency ranges. Some microphones project 3K to 5K very well.
Yep.
But that might not be the mic you need because your voice is so high pitched already. Like, when you're dealing with your microphones, you need to understand the different types of microphones, the cardioids, the hypercardioids, and the different type of diaphragms that you can grab, because I always tell every artist who asks me about, hey man, I'm trying to build my home studio, what kind of mic you think I need? Well, I've recorded you before. You got a nice mid-range type of voice. Hey, go for this type of mic. Go look at the specs. What's your budget, first of all? That'll always be the most important thing. But once you find your budget, go check out the specs to each microphone. You're going to want to roll off. You're going to want some type of boost, maybe a 10 dB boost or something like that, for especially when you have a deep voice. Because the thing about deep voices is you can't crank up the gain so much on a deep voice, because it'll peak and it'll be distorted.
Unless that's something you want.
Yeah,
you
now
normally
that's the
don't want distortion, but depending on the artist.
I would always say get that post-production.
Yep.
Get that post-recording, because one, if you recorded it like that, you'll never be able to change it. But, even more so, just make sure you guys are looking at the specs of your mics. If you're an engineer and you got this huge client, you got a huge opportunity coming up, and you're like, man, it's the biggest client I ever worked with, but they want me to come to this studio. If you are not online on that studio's website, looking at their gear list, learning their gear list, it's not about learning how it's routed, because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be routed the way the studio means it to be routed. All you have to do is come in, pull up Pro Tools, and press record for the most part.
Yeah. In
real professional studios. It's more of what kind of warmth am I getting out of this preamp? What kind of, frequency response am I getting out of this microphone? The different kind of artists I'm working with has a very, very, very high-pitched voice, and she yells. not really yells, but she really projects her voice when she sings. Okay, let me see if they have a smaller diaphragm mic so I can kind of bring down some of those huge resonant high pitched frequencies that I know that she's gonna be pushing. Let me see if I can do some type of high pass filter. Maybe this mic has a high pass filter where I can cut off at 16K because I don't want to hear that in her voice.
Yeah.
The recording part, and this is why microphones are so important. They only record what you give them. They're not gonna record anything that you're thinking. You can go in there and say, I sing like Beyonce. And when you get in there on that microphone,
You don't sound nothing like Beyonce.
that microphone will tell you the truth, whether you sing like Beyonce or not. It's nothing the engineer can do. Well, you know, they can put
There's
plugins.
only so much we can do.
Exactly. It's only so much we can do when it comes to recording.
Yeah.
And this is why your microphone is the most important part of your vocal chain.
Yes.
Pay attention to your microphone and your interface. Certain interfaces work better with certain mics. Like the thing about it is when you're buying this gear, it's just like buying a car. You're gonna go look up the Carfax on it. You're gonna go look up whatever warranties come with it, whatever recalls have been placed in the last year or two. You're gonna look up everything about this car before you buy it. Everything about this house before you buy it. It's the same thing with this gear because you can spend $2,000 on the microphone and have the best microphone in the neighborhood, and it sounds like BS because you don't even know what you really bought and you don't know how to use what you bought.
Yeah. And the good thing that anybody can do, if you go to your, local studio, if there's one around you, depending on their microphone locker, depending on how many mics they have, you can actually book a session, a 2-hour session. Basically, any studio you go to is going to be a minimum of 2 hours. If you have time and money, you can test those microphones, seeing which one is good for your voice. It could be, okay, I like this $2,000 mic, but this $200 mic sounds similar. And it could be something as simple as that. You test out the mic, you book the room, you record a little, and then you go to Guitar Center, Best Buy, Guitar Center, and buy the mic. And then when it comes to the mic itself, any recording engineer knows when you send it to the mixing engineer, you want to make sure they get it at a high quality. It's nothing that they have to do too much of. You don't want to get that text from the engineer the vocals is not sounding good. I don't know how y'all record it, but it sounds terrible. Y'all gonna have to do that session again. That's something you do not want to hear. Never happened to me. Did it happen to you before?
I've been on the other end of that to where I've told artists hey, you need to re-record this because this is the thing about recording, and I'm pretty sure because I've done so much recording, so I know I've had a lot of trial and error. So I'm pretty sure earlier on it's definitely happened to me to where you think you recorded it good, right? You think you recorded it perfectly, it sounds good, the artist is happy. And then they all right, I need my session so I can send it to my mixing engineer. And usually, or more so, since the pandemic here, I've been doing a lot of mixing from different engineers, different artists. And one thing that I see is a lot of recordings are super distorted.
Yeah. You
might not hear it at first. And just to piggyback on what you were talking about having the mic shootout and trying the different mics, in 2 hours, even if you just take an hour to do it or you research whatever mics they have before you get there. However, sound check is just as important as it is in live sound. It's just that important in recording because it can sound good. It can be, oh yeah, I love that preamp. I fixed that compressor perfectly. Oh, I EQ'd that perfectly. But did you really do some real gain staging? Is your trim too high? Do you know the difference between trim and gain? Because you're turning both of those knobs up. Different things like that. And then when you get into the mixing process, either you realize or another engineer realizes that, okay, the way this is recorded was not what I want. Like when you're listening to songs on the radio and you're an engineer, you're a producer or artist or whoever, whatever you are comparing your music to, you listen to the radio like, man, it's just such a clarity in his vocals. A lot of times it doesn't have anything to do with where they recorded what studio. The microphone might play a point, but it could be that microphone in the hotel room or in the kitchen or somewhere. The thing about it is the engineer has found that gray level, that gray area, or where it is simply sitting perfectly directly in the middle. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so real quick before we cut this, our last session. So my last session was with Broad Pyramidian. It was basically something simple. I like the track itself. I'm not going to put too much information on it, but a big thing about the session, it had like a lot of reverb and delay, and sometimes the tail of it was too long, so I had to compress it out. That's why I would use a sidechain. I think that was in the last episode, so that was something from our last session.
My last session was with Bouquet. Shout out Bouquet.
Yeah.
My brother. And he's actually taking a whole new approach to his music now. And so in this particular session, and I have a lot of recurring clients. So, when I see them, or they, sometimes they might take a month or two off. You know how writers are. And then they come back and I'm like, hey, look, man, you've been gone for a month or two or whatever, but I got better. I like to just kind of build that camaraderie between my artists. But so I was working on Bouquet's session, and in this particular session, for like the first time, I've never had to do this with him before, but he wanted the different tones of voices, the different pitches.
Yeah.
And we was able to find common ground on a high pitch and a low pitch voice and blend it, and to where he was definitely more satisfied, and he agreed that I had got better. So it was a great session. It was a great session.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about more session as time goes by for the podcast, but from everybody at Rebel Ears, we just want to say thank you for everybody who's listening, who's going to the website, buying the packs, reading our articles. Thank you for listening to the podcast.
It's been YL, along with Rebel Ears Ray. We appreciate you guys. We love you guys, all the supporters. We do this for you. Keep tuning in. A lot of content coming this year. And again, we thank you guys, and we hope you guys have a blessed day. Hope we blessed you with some great information, and we were able to entertain you with our personal experiences. And until next time, this is the Rebel Ears Podcast.